Assalamu alaikum everybody. So we're back at the module Core English and Communication. We're going to be talking about writing nonfiction today. Just very briefly, nothing in detail. This is the third part of the first module. So let's start. Writing nonfiction. Nonfiction texts are those that deal with facts, opinions, and the real world. Many nonfiction texts follow specific conventions of the language and structure. So introducing nonfiction text, for example, a newspaper article usually uses a headline, uses formal language, and takes a serious tone. A political speech usually addresses the audience directly, includes a persuasive language, and often has a rousing tone. With all the writing text, it's important to consider the convention of the form, the structure, your intended audience, to the reader, and the purpose of your writing. So what's your main aim and why you're writing this article? So your reader might be one particular person, as with an email or a letter. So when you're writing an email or a letter, obviously you'd be talking to one specific person, or it might be a broader group of people, as with an article or a speech. So having a clear purpose will allow you to select language best suited to your task. So writing a speech. The structure. A speech often follows a three-part structure. So a highly engaging and motivational opening, a well-structured argument with several main points that include objection handling. So these two go together. The second and the third point go together, and then a dynamic and memorable conclusion. So formal language is more appropriate to use when writing a nonfiction text. The purpose of a speech is often to convince listeners of a particular point of view. So the language in a nonfiction text is mostly persuasive, so depending on the audience again. So the purpose of a speech is often to convince listeners of a particular point of view. So language is typically persuasive, as I said before, and later on this module we will cover some persuasive devices which you could include to make your speech more dynamic and memorable. So writing a letter is another example of a non-fiction text. So the structure of this non-fiction text, a letter, has a conventional structure again, so a very normal structure, a structure that you should follow, meaning conventional. So the sender's postal address goes in the top right-hand corner of the paper, and the receipt's postal address, meaning the person who is actually sorry, I just lost the track. The receipt's postal address is written to the left and slightly below this with the date underneath. A letter that opens with a greeting, dear, if you do not know the name of the person you are writing to. For example, if you were emailing a company about a product rather than a particular person that works here. So the convention is to start your letter with dear sir or madam when you don't know the person's name, or if it's to a broader group. So the initial paragraph usually outlines the overall aim of the letter, and the conclusion summarizes the main points, okay? So when ending the letter, there are different ways to end a letter depending on the addressee, so depending on the reader. If you have named the receipt at the start, example, dear Mr. Banks, dear Freya, your letter ends with yours sincerely. If you haven't named the receipt at the start, so the receipt meaning your audience, your reader, you'd have to put down dear sir or madam, so your letter ends with yours faithfully. So in conclusion, if you know the person's name, you would end your letter with saying yours sincerely, and if you do not know their name, then you would end it with yours faithfully. So the language in a formal letter the convention again, meaning by convention is the structure is used. It includes standard English. The tone of your letter will vary depending on your purpose. Again, depending on your purpose and your aim and your main point of view for the letter, it depends on what kind of tone that you want to set up. So we will look and compare detailed examples later on in this course, so you wouldn't have to worry about that. Okay, so writing an article, here are a few examples where you might expect to find an article. A magazine, a website, a certain sections of newspapers, and an article is a piece of writing, usually around 800 to 2,000 words about a particular topic. So sometimes an article will offer a balanced view of subject, and other times an article might be biased towards a person or in a political standpoint. So I'm sure many of you would have come across an article in a magazine or a website or certain sections in a newspaper. So and usually they are around 800 to 1,000 words, sometimes about a political standpoint, or sometimes just casual facts. So for example, over here, an article might also be flavored by the writer's style. So depending on the purpose, you might use very different informative language or more poetic language to create a sense of the subject matter. So here are some typical subjects covered by article writers. So travel, sport, history, hobbies, home or craft, music, celebrities, and famous figures. So the basic structure of an article for a newspaper or magazine or a website is usually in 3 parts. So an opening paragraph would be engaging the reader and outlining the main point of the article, and the middle paragraphs are a series of paragraphs that go into more details explaining the main topic and including examples, maybe possibly, and the end paragraph would conclude the paragraph and draw all the points together. Within the structure, you could also create a structure in which the conclusion connects back to the opening idea. So the opening paragraph and the conclusion paragraph would go together and just conclude, obviously the last paragraph would conclude all the points. So for example, an article about Kerala in India opens with a writer describing the view from a train. The middle section describes the Alfusa, the place the writer is traveling away from, and goes into details about the boat trip they took there. And then in the concluding paragraph, he brings us back to the train and highlights his trip. So the language used in an article, the language of an article depends upon the purpose and the audience. You'll see how I always stress upon the purpose and the audience because it depends on who you're writing the article for. That way you will set the convention and the structure of an article. So it will fit the content and the intended readers. For example, an article about a recent film release would include language that deals with actors, scripts, and performance, and is likely to include the writer's opinions of the film. So articles are usually written in standard English again, and then you could also use phrases that might be used to emphasize a point, and literacy techniques such as a metaphor and a simile or rhetorical questions. I'm not sure if you're all aware of what a metaphor and a simile is. If not, let us know in the feedback and then we would explain this further. So now it's your turn. This is your sample task. As always, you have 30 to 40 minutes and your task is basically to write an article for a broadcast newspaper in which you explain your point of view for this statement. So the statement is that libraries are relics from the past. Everything we need to know these days can be found online. So library buildings could be put to a better use as a community space. So what this statement is saying is it's saying that libraries nowadays, we don't need them. And as we can access everything online, for example, we need an article, we need a newspaper, we need a book, or especially a book, that's what libraries have mostly. Any journal articles, you can search everything online these days. So what this statement is saying that we do not need library buildings. So it could be put into better use for a community space or for other businesses could use those buildings. So now it's your turn to write an article for a newspaper in which you explain your point of view. Okay, very simple, and there's no right or wrong answer, so you don't have to worry about it because it's your point of view. Personally, I would think that obviously, I would think that we still need the library buildings. Most people I know still do go to the library to borrow the books from there. It's just nice to have around. You wouldn't want that to go away either, just because of all this online technology these days. But that's my point of view. So now it's your turn to give your point across using obviously the article structure, which is shown in this slide. So I'll let you go. I'll let you get on with it then. So the next lesson would be about writing in a timed test. So if you get a question in the test, we would obviously plan how to write this. You would have a set time to plan the question and a set time for the actual question itself. So we're going to practice how we can use our time very effectively. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this lesson. See you